The year is now 2003, and a lot of things in my personal life had changed. For one, between 2000 and 2003, I had discovered Iron Maiden, for one, which has now resulted in a decade of absolute adoration of this band. I discovered the Iron Maiden band board, which was my exposure to the first of many great experiences on message boards communicating with metal fans around the world, which eventually, of course, led to the inception of this YouTube account. And thirdly, Maiden had finally wrapped up the Brave New World tour and gone to the studio to pen their next masterpiece, which would be entitled Dance of Death. Now, the first thing that Dance of Death shares is something that's, well, very distinct, and that's the album cover. The album cover is, well, wildly seen as one of the most unique and one of the cheesiest in the band's history. Something that a lot of fans traditionally do not seem to like. However, whenever you consider the subject content of the title track itself, it makes a little bit more sense. It's almost like they took this track to heart and really put it as the central theme. And in reality, whenever you take a look at Brave New World, they did the exact same thing with that one as well. You see Eddie's face in the cloud over the Brave New World, and it's also symbolic of course, the return of Bruce Dickinson. Now, the second Dickinson release with the band, in the second era of Dickinson, is oftentimes sometimes seen as the weaker album, the flop, the one where a lot of the conventional fans kind of turned their head aside and kind of cocked it like, wait a second. Whereas many other fans became even more deeply interested in this band. Now, myself personally, of course, having the nostalgia from Brave New World creeping in after 3 years, and seeing another Iron Maiden release, this one actually being the first release where I got to see the release date as a fan. Of course, this was very exciting for me. This is something where I immediately went out and purchased the album. The result, of course, was that afterglow effect of purchasing the new release of one of your favorite bands. No matter what they do, be it good, bad, or ugly, you're going to love it just because finally the wait is over. Now, it's been 7 years since that day. There's been many objective ways to look at this album, and many objective ways have been done to look at this album, in my own opinion and in the opinions of other Maiden fans that I happen to also be associated with. And while I still retain the fact that Dance of Death definitely has some fantastic moments and some elements that I'm about to share with you, out of the new era of Iron Maiden with Bruce Dickinson, I would probably stick this one at the end of the line. Does that necessarily make it a bad album? Wait and see, and I'll let you know. First incantations we had from this album was the song Wildest Dreams, which is a pretty good opener. And whenever you hear the song for the first time, of course, you're going to really be very judgmental about it and kind of think that you're going to get the feel for the way in which the album is going to be. And for this particular song, it seemed pretty different. It resembled a little bit more of the old style, however, it didn't seem to have that same flavor, that same kick. This is something that they debuted on their tour, something that I was able to see live before the album was released, so regardless of the fact, I was very, very excited, and I was intrigued by this particular song. However, whenever I listen to this album now, I hear this intro, it's very recognizable, it's something that is easy to pick out, and I know that Dance of Death is about to occur. Rainmaker has a addictive opening, but at the same time, it's a fairly average song, something that kind of meh. I mean, that's my personal take on it. It's kind of meh. I love the opening to it. It's a very nice little idea, and it's very addicting, as I said. However, overall, it's a song that kind of just is there for me. Kind of, as I said, with Brave New World, with a song like The Mercenary, where it's kind of just there, but it beats the pants off of the 4 that I dislike from Virtual 11. It's kind of in that particular format, only pulled a little bit lower than The Mercenary. No More Lies is actually the first track that really captured my interest on this record for a long period of time. I liked the song for a long, long, long time, and still will go back to it to this day. I enjoy it a lot. It's a very interesting track. I think that Bruce's vocals are definitely the best so far out of the 3 songs on No More Lies, and it's also a longer track, which is a little bit more resemblant to the first half of Brave New World. So you're immediately kind of going back to that Brave New World nostalgia idea, where it's almost that those particular ideas that they do are the ones that perhaps I relate to the most, and thusly those are the tracks that I'm going to like the most. It's also a song that features a lot of pace change and a lot of shifts, which is something that I've also grown to really love about latter era Iron Maiden. Move on to Monseigneur, and this is another song that whenever it first came out, I fell in love with almost instantaneously. However, my love of this track has kind of diminished throughout the years. I really liked the chorus of this particular track for a long time, but now whenever I recall it in my head, it does still get stuck in my head every so often. However, it doesn't leave me with that same feeling of pleasure or of a headbanging mentality as it did before. Instead, it actually turns me off from wanting to listen to it whenever it comes into my head, because overall, it's a fairly decent song, and in fact, I would consider it to be above average. Many people would disagree, saying that it's either a lot better than I claim or a lot worse, depending on their stance. However, for me, it's one of the songs that had an early luster that has it's lost its shine a little bit. However, the absolute inverse could be said about the title track, Dance of Death. This is a song that was written exclusively by Janet Gers and Adrian Harris. Fuck me in the asshole right now. Steve Harris. And is a song that whenever I first heard it, I was not overly crazy about it, but now it shines like gold in the Olympics. This is a song that over the past couple of weeks I have turned to many, many a time. Especially late at night after a hard day at work, it's something that's very, very satisfying for me. The introductory acoustic and electric riff just brings me back to life, so to speak, after work kind of takes my spirit away, so to speak, which is very interesting and quite the nice parallel to what this song really references a lot. This is just a beautiful track, and it's one that kind of goes with that whole circle of life idea that I sometimes mention in my reviews. And what this means is that it's a very cyclical nature where an idea begins, then the idea gets built upon to a differing melody or a differing idea in the middle part of the song, only to revert back to the original idea in the latter stages and ending of the song. This is something that is very, very commonplace to musical structure, and if you don't see it in a lot of older music or a lot of progressive music, it's usually because these are multi-part tracks that end with either the closing really resembling the opening, or with one of the key parts in the midst or in the middle being reprised. Now, Dance of Death, as I said, I wasn't crazy about whenever it first came out. Whenever I first heard it, I thought it was a little cheesy. Now I absolutely adore it. I love singing Bruce's lower register on this particular song during the beginning and during the end. Because let's face it, I am not an air raid siren, so that middle part, Bruce, that's all you, buddy. Not to mention, this is a song that while some people maybe are getting tired of hearing live, I absolutely love the experience. And seeing it now, again, would have been awe-inspiring for me, but I didn't have the opportunity. Gates of Tomorrow and New Frontier are the next two tracks on the record, and both of them, for me, are not ones that are very memorable. And this is kind of where Dance of Death kind of enters into this kind of weakness category, where a couple of the tracks are not as memorable as some of the others, which is a problem that Brave New World didn't have. Brave New World, to me, is very, very fixated in my mind. It's something that I can almost resemble and reproduce for you key by key, which is something that's very, very difficult to say about any album, let alone one that was released a decade prior. But whenever you have tracks that are very difficult to remember, then you kind of run into some issue. And I think the reason why this is because the track that follows these two, Passchendaele, is passionately adored by the fans of this band, and I am one of them. There's a lot of great, great elements to this particular track. It's a lot like Dance of Death in some ways, in that it does have Bruce's lower register, or that cleaner style singing, that softer style that's represented a lot. Then it flows into his typical vocal theatrics. You hear some sound effects in the background of the squawking eagle, really just that showing of power. It's, of course, resembling the Battle of Passchendaele. And oddly enough, Passchendaele since then has become the issue of yet another heavy metal band the band God Dethroned, whose most recent album was Passchendaele. That was the title of the record itself. So this is something that obviously has inspired others to reflect upon the Passchendaele battle, as well as represented in their songs. Whether there be a direct correlation or not, it's very, very interesting that Iron Maiden writes the song, and then we see an album spawn up with the same name 5 to 6 years later, especially with a band that doesn't resemble Iron Maiden's style in God Dethroned. Very good album, by the way. I have not done a review on it, but I do recommend it for fans of that particular genre of music. Face in the Sand and Age of Innocence both suffer from a very similar problem. While both are pretty decent tracks, both have ideas within them that are extremely interesting and very hard to get out of your head. And Face of the Sand is exceptionally true for this. The introduction to this song has a 3-layer harmony of sorts that is very infectious, that I love to death, and while I do say that I do enjoy the chorus of this song as well, that introduction is really what captures me. It's what really draws me in. If I were to say that this album has one strength, and that's the fact that its introduction really wraps you up and takes you into the bits of the song. And I think it's really anything beyond that where a song potentially could be a little bit weaker than some of the output that we saw in Brave New World, and which may cause Dance of Death to have a much lower score than Brave New World. However, that leads us to Journeyman. Journeyman is a very, very different song. It's a song that resembles Nomad in a way, where it really resembles a man who is traveling in multiple locations, really spinning his creative dialogue on the fact that he is doing just this. And the real central theme behind this is that I know what I want and I'll say what I want, and no one can take that away. That forever, basically, throughout this man's life that is being documented throughout this song, he has always played by his own rules. And whatever that means and whatever that needs to be, whenever he has to move, he moves. He moves when he wants, he goes as he pleases, and he doesn't let anything take that away from him. He is the Journeyman. This is a very, very great closer. I love this track. Many people hate it. Many people lament about it. It's almost exclusively not really considered to be a huge metal track, so to speak, but that's actually what I like about it, because this is something that really shows Iron Maiden going outside of the so-called self-proclaimed box to really perform something unique and interesting, especially as an ending. As you know, I always say that the ending, the last track of the album, is usually the band's real attempt to sparkle and shine through experimentation, which sometimes works, other times does not. A lot of conventional fans say that it did not work with this particular track. I say that it did, and I will dispute it to the death. Overall, Dance of Death, I must say, suffered quite a large differential in a numerical rating, so to speak, as opposed to Brave New World, where Brave New World received a solid 9. I would give Dance of Death a solid 8. Certainly doesn't suffer from Virtual Eleven's calamity of I love 4 tracks, I hate 4 tracks. Absolutely not. There are tracks that I said that are not as memorable, but it does not necessarily mean that these tracks are necessarily bad. The song definitely has much fewer amazing moments that I could recant word for word or note by note through humming, because I am guitarly, as far as the guitar goes, I have the skills of a retard that missed the short bus. However, this is an album that is certainly one that may take some hardcore fans a little bit more time to respect. However, if you do give it its proper go, this is an album that you will grow to respect due to some of the experimentation that is laced within.